I'm Mackenzie Wilson, 32, and last spring I did something I never thought I was capable of. My sister Stephanie left me literally bleeding and in tears at her dress fitting after years of abuse. That day changed everything. One simple click was all it took to dismantle her $100,000 wedding. Was it wrong? Probably. Do I regret it? That's complicated. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit subscribe, and stick around to decide if you would have done the same thing in my shoes. Growing up with Stephanie was like living in the shadow of a supernova. For years younger, but somehow always the center of attention, my sister had mastered the art of being our parents' golden child before she could even spell the word manipulation. Our childhood home in suburban Connecticut was essentially the Stephanie show, with Mom, Dad, and I as the captive audience. I can pinpoint exactly when I realized our family dynamic wasn't normal. It was Stephanie's 10th birthday party, a lavish affair with a rented bounce house, professional face painters, and a custom cake that probably cost more than my entire birthday budget that year. I was 14 and had spent 3 months on a science project about renewable energy, creating a working solar-powered model car that had qualified me for the state championship scheduled for the following weekend. The morning of Stephanie's party, I came downstairs to find my sister hovering over my project on the dining room table, a suspicious smile on her face. "What are you doing with my car?" I asked, feeling a familiar sense of dread. "Nothing," she replied, stepping back to reveal my painstaking work completely dismantled, pieces scattered across the table. The tiny solar panels I had carefully wired were crushed, the balsa wood frames snapped in half. "Stephanie, I worked on that for months. The competition is next week." Tears sprang to my eyes as I gathered the broken pieces. "It was an accident," she said, not even attempting to sound convincing. "I was just looking at it." When our parents came in, Stephanie immediately burst into tears. "Mackenzie is being mean to me on my birthday. She says I ruined her stupid car thing on purpose, but I didn't." Instead of investigating what actually happened, my parents scolded me for upsetting Stephanie on her special day. I was forced to apologize to her. The science competition came and went without me, while Stephanie received extra presents for being so brave about her mean big sister. High school graduation should have been my moment. I had worked incredibly hard to become valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Northwestern, and was finally getting my time in the spotlight. As I stood at the podium delivering my speech, I spotted my family in the audience. My parents were beaming, and for once, their pride was directed solely at me. At the celebration dinner afterward, just as my father was raising a toast to my achievements, Stephanie clinked her glass loudly. "Since we're all gathered here, I have some exciting news too," she announced. She proceeded to share that she had been selected for a summer internship at a local TV station. It was a standard internship that dozens of students received, nothing exceptional. Yet somehow, the rest of the dinner shifted entirely to Stephanie's amazing accomplishment. My scholarship and valedictory speech became secondary conversations. The pattern continued into adulthood. When I landed my first marketing job in New York after college, my accomplishment was acknowledged with a quick, "That's nice, dear," phone call. When Stephanie decided to pursue event planning after dropping out of 3 different college programs, my parents funded her business venture completely. The Thanksgiving dinner incident 3 years ago was particularly painful. I had just been promoted to senior marketing director at my agency, the youngest person to hold the position in the company's history. During dinner, I timidly raised my glass to share my news, something I was genuinely proud of after years of hard work. I'm grateful to be here with family and excited to share that I received a major promotion last week. It's been a challenging year, but oh my God, speaking of exciting news. Stephanie interrupted, practically bouncing in her seat. She thrust her left hand forward, a sizable diamond glittering on her ring finger. "James proposed last night. We're engaged." The table erupted in excitement. My mother burst into tears. My father immediately opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion, and my news was completely forgotten. Not one family member circled back to ask about my promotion. When I tried to bring it up again later, my mother shushed me with, Let's not take attention away from your sister's special moment, Mackenzie. Despite these dynamics, I continued trying to build a relationship with my sister. I sent thoughtful birthday gifts, made efforts to call regularly, and always showed interest in her life. In return, Stephanie would grace me with attention when it suited her, usually when she needed something or when no better options were available. As we entered our 30s, I had built a successful career in digital marketing, earning enough to afford my own apartment in Manhattan. Stephanie, meanwhile, bounced between jobs in event planning, social media management, and personal assistant roles, never sticking with anything for more than a few months. Yet in family conversations, you'd think she was a high-powered executive and I was barely employed. Every small win in her life was celebrated as a major achievement, while my steady career growth was treated as expected and unremarkable. "Your sister just needs more encouragement," my mother would say when I rarely voiced frustration. "She's more sensitive than you. You've always been so independent, but Stephanie needs a bit more support." When Stephanie met James Parker at a charity gala she was working, I genuinely hoped this relationship might be good for her. James seemed kind, successful, and grounded. Maybe having a stable partner would help Stephanie mature. Maybe planning her wedding would give her a healthy outlet for her need to be the center of attention. Maybe, I thought naively, this wedding could be a chance to repair our relationship and create a healthier family dynamic moving forward. How terribly wrong I was. James proposed to Stephanie after just 10 months of dating. The proposal was elaborate and clearly expensive: a private yacht cruise around Manhattan, professional photographers documenting every moment, and a custom-designed 4-carat diamond ring. I found out via Instagram, where Stephanie posted a professional quality video of the entire thing before she bothered to call any family members. When she finally did call our parents, I happened to be visiting them for the weekend. They immediately put her on speakerphone, and I listened as Stephanie breathlessly recounted every detail of the proposal, emphasizing the cost of everything as if the price tag was the most romantic part. "The ring is from Tiffany, and James said it cost almost as much as his first car," she squealed. "And the yacht was $5,000 just for 3 hours." My parents oohed and awed appropriately. When they mentioned I was there, Stephanie's tone changed immediately. "Oh, Mackenzie. Perfect timing. I'm going to need bridesmaids, of course, and I'd love for you to be one." Her voice had that saccharine quality I recognized from whenever she was performing generosity. "Wow, thanks, Stephanie. That's really nice of you." I was genuinely surprised to be included. "Of course. You're my sister. I mean, Brittany is obviously my maid of honor. We've been best friends forever, but you definitely need to be in the bridal party." I swallowed my instinctive disappointment. Of course Brittany would be maid of honor. Brittany, who had known Stephanie for a grand total of 5 years and who encouraged her worst impulses. But I was determined to be supportive. This was progress, right? Being included at all? The first wedding planning meeting happened at our parents' house 3 weeks later. Stephanie had hired Victoria Barnes, a high-end wedding planner who typically handled celebrity events. She arrived with a leather portfolio and an expression that suggested she was already regretting taking on my sister as a client. "I've been thinking about themes," Stephanie announced once everyone was settled. "I'm torn between timeless romance and modern fairy tale." "Those sound lovely," I offered. "What about incorporating some personal elements that reflect you and James as a couple? Maybe something with music since he loves jazz, or—" No, Stephanie cut me off, not even looking in my direction. "We're not doing anything quirky or personal. This wedding needs to be Instagram perfect." Victoria knows what I'm talking about. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Both themes Stephanie mentioned can certainly create a stunning visual impact. The budget will determine how elaborate we can go." At the mention of budget, my father shifted uncomfortably. "Speaking of which, your mother and I have set aside $50,000 for the wedding. It's the same amount we've been saving for both you girls." Stephanie's face fell immediately. "50,000? Dad, that's nothing for a New York wedding." "Victoria, tell them." Victoria cleared her throat diplomatically. "For the venues and scale Miss Wilson has been discussing, we would typically budget between $100,000 to $150,000 minimum." My parents' faces paled. I knew they had been saving that wedding fund for years, and $50,000 was already stretching their retirement planning. Well, James' parents will contribute too, obviously, Stephanie said, waving her hand dismissively. And James makes good money. We'll figure it out. The final budget they settled on was just over $100,000. My parents would contribute their $50,000, James' family would add $25,000, and the remaining amount would come from James himself. Not once did Stephanie offer to contribute a penny of her own money. As the planning progressed, Stephanie's demands of her bridesmaids became increasingly unreasonable. First came the mandatory spa weekend in the Hamptons, costing each bridesmaid $700 for accommodations alone, not counting treatments or meals. Then it was the suggested personal trainer sessions to ensure everyone would look perfect in the photos. I'm sending everyone meal plans too, Stephanie announced during a bridesmaids brunch that cost me half a day's wages. I need everyone at their goal weight by the final fitting. Mackenzie, I've added some extra cardio recommendations for you. I nearly choked on my $15 orange juice. Excuse me. Don't get defensive. I'm just being honest. The dresses are form-fitting, and the photographer can only edit so much. She patted my hand condescendingly. When the hair requirements were emailed out, I stared at my phone in disbelief. Stephanie was requesting that I dye my naturally dark brown hair to a warm caramel blonde to better complement the color scheme. This is getting ridiculous, I complained to Allison over wine in my apartment. She wants me to completely change my appearance for one day of photos. Allison, my best friend since college, had been watching the wedding drama unfold with increasing concern. Mac, at what point do you draw the line? She's treating you like a prop, not a sister. I know. But it's her wedding. And maybe if I just go along with it, we can finally have that sister relationship I've always wanted. Even saying it out loud sounded desperate. The relationship you want requires both people to care about each other, Allison pointed out gently. I'm not seeing much evidence that Stephanie cares about anyone but herself. Deep down, I knew she was right. But I kept hoping this wedding could somehow transform my sister into the person I'd always wished she would be. Instead, it was transforming her into someone even worse. Despite everything, I threw myself into planning the perfect bridal shower for Stephanie. Since I wasn't the maid of honor, I coordinated with Brittany, who was suspiciously hands-off about the whole thing. You're so good with all these details, Mackenzie, she said during our one planning call. I'm swamped with work, so why don't you handle the venue, food, decorations, and games, and I'll take care of the invitations. Which meant I was essentially planning the entire event. I spent weeks researching venues, eventually booking a private room at an upscale restaurant in Soho. I created custom decorations that matched Stephanie's wedding colors, ordered a professionally designed cake, and even hired a string quartet for ambience. The cost was substantial. Between the venue, food, decorations, and my own time, I had invested over $3,000 and countless hours. But seeing my sister genuinely happy would be worth it, I told myself. The day of the shower arrived, and everything looked perfect. The restaurant had executed my vision beautifully, with delicate flower arrangements at each table, champagne flutes ready for toasting, and elegant place settings for each guest. The custom "Future Mrs. Parker" banner I had designed hung gracefully across one wall, and gift bags with personalized items awaited each guest. Guests began arriving at noon. Stephanie was scheduled to arrive at 12:30. By 1:15, she still hadn't shown up, and I was fielding awkward questions from relatives and friends who were growing increasingly hungry and impatient. Finally, at 1:30, Stephanie swept in with Brittany and two other bridesmaids in tow. They were dressed in matching outfits that looked suspiciously like they had just come from a photo shoot. "Sorry we're late," Stephanie announced, not sounding sorry at all. "We had an emergency dress consultation that ran long." Her eyes scanned the room, and I waited for her face to light up with appreciation. Instead, her expression remained neutral, with a slight downturn at the corners of her mouth. "This is nice," she said flatly. "I thought we discussed a garden theme, though." We had never discussed a garden theme. In fact, Stephanie had specifically approved the color scheme and venue I had selected. The cake is chocolate, she questioned upon seeing the beautiful three-tiered creation I had ordered from a renowned bakery. I'm not eating carbs this month. I thought everyone knew that. As the shower progressed, Stephanie and Brittany kept whispering to each other and laughing behind their hands. Their eyes would dart to me, then back to each other, followed by more laughter. The other guests noticed, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere that no amount of champagne could dissolve. During the gift opening portion, Stephanie opened my present last. I had spent weeks tracking down a first edition copy of her favorite childhood book, along with a handwritten letter about how I hoped she and James would read it to their children someday, carrying on a small piece of our shared childhood. Stephanie glanced at it for barely 3 seconds. Oh, an old book. Vintage, I guess. Thanks, Mackenzie. She tossed it aside without reading the letter and quickly moved on to thanking everyone for coming. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as though all my efforts had been completely invisible. While helping clean up afterward, I accidentally walked into the bathroom while Stephanie and Brittany were inside. So pathetic, Stephanie was saying. Like a children's party from the suburbs. I told my mother we should have had it at the plaza. At least you got some decent gifts, Brittany replied. Except that weird old book from your sister. What was that about? They both laughed, then fell silent when they noticed me standing frozen in the doorway. I turned and walked out without a word, blinking back tears. Later, when most guests had left, I approached Stephanie privately. Was there something wrong with the shower? You seemed disappointed, and I heard what you said in the bathroom. Stephanie's face immediately hardened. You were eavesdropping on me? God, Mackenzie, that's so invasive. If you must know, yes, it wasn't what I envisioned for my bridal shower. It was nice if you're into that basic, budget kind of thing. Basic? Budget? I spent thousands of dollars and weeks planning this for you. Well, maybe next time ask more questions instead of just doing what you want. This was supposed to be about me, not showing off your little party planning skills. She rolled her eyes dramatically. You're being way too sensitive, as usual. When I called my parents that evening, still upset, their response was predictable. You know how Stephanie gets about these things, my mother said. She has such a specific vision. I'm sure she appreciated the effort, honey. Maybe next time just try harder to understand what she wants. Try harder. The perpetual instruction when it came to my sister. I was always the one who needed to try harder, be more understanding, give more grace. Never Stephanie. That night, I cried in my car for almost an hour before I could bring myself to drive home. I called Allison, who listened to the whole story with growing indignation. Mac, this is not normal, she insisted. You're being abused by your own family, and they have you so conditioned that you keep going back for more. Please consider stepping back from this whole wedding nightmare. But I couldn't. Something in me still desperately wanted my sister's approval, my parents' equal love, a family that functioned like families were supposed to. So I dried my tears, pushed down the hurt, and prepared myself for the next wedding activity, the bachelorette party. Brittany planned the bachelorette party, a 5-day extravaganza in Las Vegas that would cost each bridesmaid $2,000 for their share of the suite, activities, and meals, not including flights, individual expenses, or the recommended gift contribution for Stephanie. The total was more than I could comfortably afford, but I put it on my credit card and tried to be excited. Maybe a few days away from New York, with plenty of champagne and bonding time, would improve my relationship with Stephanie and the other bridesmaids. Our group of 6 arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Stephanie had insisted on a penthouse suite at the Bellagio, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the famous fountain. It was admittedly spectacular, though it reinforced the knowledge that this weekend would put a significant dent in my savings. The first evening started promisingly enough. We had dinner reservations at a trendy restaurant in our hotel, and Stephanie was in high spirits, excitedly talking about married life and her honeymoon plans. James is taking me to the Maldives for 2 weeks, she gushed. We're staying in one of those overwater bungalows with a glass floor, so you can see the fish swimming underneath. That sounds amazing, I said, genuinely happy to see her excited about something other than Instagram opportunities. James seems to really understand what makes you happy. Stephanie's smile faltered slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing negative, I backpedaled quickly. Just that he clearly puts thought into choosing things you'll love. She seemed satisfied with this response, and dinner continued pleasantly enough. After dinner, Brittany announced we had VIP table reservations at XS, one of the most exclusive nightclubs in Vegas. The table minimum is $3,000, she informed us as we headed back to our suite to change. But Stephanie's college friend manages the place, so we're getting it for half price. Everyone cheered at this news, while I silently calculated the additional cost beyond the $2,000 I had already committed. We arrived at the club around 11:30 p.m., dressed in our finest club attire. Stephanie wore a white mini dress with "Bride" spelled out in crystals across the back, and the rest of us had matching black dresses with "Squad" similarly emblazoned. At the entrance, the bouncer checked his list as Brittany gave Stephanie's name. Stephanie Wilson, party of 6. We have VIP table reservations. He scanned the list again, frowning. I have Stephanie Wilson, party of 5. And the names I have are. He read off 5 names, excluding mine. There must be some mistake, I said, my stomach sinking. I'm the bride's sister. Stephanie looked annoyed rather than concerned. Brittany, didn't you update the reservation when we added Mackenzie? Brittany's expression was unconvincingly apologetic. I thought I did. They must have made a mistake. Can you add one more person? Stephanie asked the bouncer, not making eye contact with me. The table is reserved for 5. We're at capacity tonight, so we can't add anyone else to existing reservations. She can wait in the regular line if she wants to enter the club, but she won't have access to your VIP area. The regular line wrapped around the building with at least a 2-hour wait in the desert heat. Just wait in line and text us when you get in, Stephanie said dismissively. We can't miss our table time. And just like that, all 5 of them disappeared into the club, leaving me standing alone outside. I waited in that line for over an hour, watching as groups of laughing friends entered together, no one left behind. The temperature was still in the high 80s, despite it being nearly 1 a.m., and my feet were aching in the high heels I'd chosen to match the group. Finally, I reached the front of the line only to be told there was a $100 cover charge for women, not on the guest list. I paid it, adding to my growing wedding debt, and entered the packed club. The VIP section was visible on an elevated platform, but security wouldn't let me approach without the proper wristband. I texted Stephanie and Brittany repeatedly, but received no response. From my vantage point on the main floor, I could see them dancing and taking selfies, phones clearly in hand. After another hour of unsuccessful attempts to reach them, I received a text from Stephanie. We moved to Hakkasan. Meet us there. Exhausted and increasingly upset, I took a $30 cab to Hakkasan, only to repeat the same experience. My name wasn't on any list, the line was enormous, and no one responded to my texts once I informed them I had arrived. It was after 3 a.m. when I finally found them at a third club, having spent over $200 on cover charges and taxis. The group was visibly drunk, sprawled across couches in another VIP section. Mackenzie, you finally made it. Stephanie slurred, lifting her champagne glass. We thought you went back to the hotel. How would I have gone back to the hotel? I don't even have a key to the suite, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Don't be so dramatic, Brittany interjected. It's a bachelorette party. Things get crazy. The rest of the night was a blur of forced smiles and performative fun. I returned to the hotel alone at 5 a.m., sleeping on the suite's sofa since no one had waited to assign me a bed. The next morning, I seriously considered booking an early flight home. But the thought of explaining to my parents why I had abandoned Stephanie's bachelorette party stopped me. I knew whose side they would take. The second night was even worse than the first. The group took a series of photos for social media at dinner, physically positioning me out of frame each time. When I offered to take some photos so everyone could be included, Stephanie replied, "We want these to be just the close friends. No offense." By the time we returned to New York, I was emotionally depleted and financially strained. What was meant to be a bonding experience had only reinforced what I'd always known but tried to deny. To Stephanie, I wasn't a sister or even a friend. I was an obligation, an afterthought, someone to be tolerated rather than included. Yet somehow, I still couldn't bring myself to walk away. The dress fitting was in 2 weeks, and after that, the wedding was just a month away. I could make it through, I told myself. I could endure anything for a finite period of time. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The final dress fitting was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon at Kleinfeld, the famous bridal salon featured on Say Yes to the Dress. I had taken a half-day off work, losing valuable time on a major project to be there. My boss had been understanding, but made it clear that I was stretching the limits of professional courtesy with all these wedding-related absences. I arrived exactly on time, having rushed downtown from my office. The other bridesmaids were already there, clustered around a champagne cart and giggling. Stephanie sat in a plush chair like a queen holding court, still in her street clothes. "You're late," she said when she spotted me, though I was precisely on time according to the appointment details. "Sorry, I came straight from work," I apologized automatically, though I had nothing to apologize for. The habit was deeply ingrained. Stephanie looked me up and down with a critical eye. "You look tired. Did you use those eye patches I recommended? The photos will be so important." Before I could respond, the bridal consultant appeared to usher us into the fitting area. Stephanie went first, of course, disappearing behind a curtain to be helped into her gown. When she emerged, even I had to admit she looked stunning. The dress was a custom Nina Tornai creation, with a fitted bodice covered in delicate lace appliques that flowed into a dramatic tulle skirt. The $15,000 price tag made more sense seeing it in person. "You look beautiful, Stephanie," I said sincerely. She barely acknowledged the compliment, already focused on the minimal alterations needed around the waist. The consultant pinned and marked while Stephanie critiqued every millimeter adjustment. After Stephanie was satisfied with her alterations, it was the bridesmaid's turn. We had been fitted previously for our matching dusty rose gowns, which were admittedly elegant if not exactly suited to everyone's body type or coloring. I stepped into my dress with the help of a fitting assistant, noting that it felt tighter than at the previous fitting. "Did something change with the sizing?" I asked as the zipper strained slightly. "No, the measurements are exactly the same as last time," the assistant replied, though her expression suggested otherwise. When I emerged from the dressing room, Stephanie immediately zeroed in on the fit issue. "What happened? Did you gain weight after I sent the meal plan?" Her voice carried across the salon, causing several heads to turn. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "No, I've actually lost a few pounds. The dress just feels different." "Well, it looks different too. The fabric is pulling across your hips." She turned to the consultant. "Can we let this out a bit? I can't have my photos ruined." The consultant examined the dress professionally. "We can make some minor adjustments, but we're limited by the seam allowance. If we take it from the side seams, it should." "Just do whatever needs to be done," Stephanie interrupted. "And can we do something about the straps? They're making her shoulders look really wide." Each comment felt like a tiny knife. I stood on the pedestal, trying to maintain my dignity as my sister essentially catalogued every perceived flaw in my appearance. The alterations proceeded, with the seamstress carefully pinning the dress while I stood as still as possible. As she worked on the straps, adjusting them to Stephanie's exacting specifications, her pin accidentally pricked my skin. "Ouch!" I flinched involuntarily. "Please try to hold still," the seamstress murmured apologetically. I felt something warm trickle down my shoulder and realized the pin had drawn blood. A small red stain was forming on the delicate fabric. "I'm bleeding," I said, concerned about the dress more than the minor injury. Stephanie, who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up. Her expression transformed from boredom to horror to rage in the span of 3 seconds. "What did you do?" she shrieked, rushing over. "Oh my God, is that blood on the dress?" "It was an accident," the seamstress said quickly. "The pin." "I don't care about the pin," Stephanie shouted. "The dress is ruined. Do you have any idea how much these dresses cost? How are we supposed to fix this?" "It's just a small spot," I tried to reason. "I'm sure they can clean it, or maybe." "Just a small spot? Just a small spot?" Stephanie's voice had reached a pitch that threatened the salon's glassware. These dresses are custom dyed to match exactly. Even if they could remove the stain, which I doubt, the color won't be the same. The other bridesmaids had gathered around, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to secretly pleased at the drama. Brittany was not so subtly recording the meltdown on her phone. "Stephanie, please calm down. It was an accident." I was acutely aware of everyone in the salon watching us now. An accident? Really? An accident. Her face was contorted with rage. "You've been trying to sabotage my wedding from day one. You've been jealous of me your entire life, and now you're trying to ruin the most important day of my life." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's ridiculous. Why would I intentionally bleed on a dress? Because you can't stand that I'm happy. You can't stand that I'm getting married before you. You can't stand that my wedding is going to be more beautiful and more perfect than anything you could ever have." The seamstress tried to intervene. "Miss, please, we deal with these situations all the time. We can fix." "No, you can't fix this." Stephanie wasn't listening to reason. "Nothing can fix having a sister who's been jealous and resentful her entire life. Who can't just be happy for me for one day." Tears welled in my eyes, partly from the sting of the pinprick, but mostly from the public humiliation and the shocking unfairness of her accusations. "Stephanie, that's enough," I said quietly, trying to maintain my composure. "No, I've had enough. I've had enough of pretending that you support me when you're clearly jealous of everything I have. I've had enough of your passive-aggressive comments and your judging eyes. And I've definitely had enough of you in my wedding." A stunned silence fell over the salon. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. "You're out. You're out of the wedding, you're out of the photos, you're out of all of it. I don't want you there." Her eyes were cold, any sisterly affection completely absent. "You're kicking me out of your wedding over an accident with a pin." My voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm kicking you out because you've been nothing but a dark cloud over this entire process. Look at you, with your judgmental expression and your sensible career and your apartment in the city that you just had to get without roommates to prove how independent you are." Her rant had taken a bizarre turn, revealing resentments I hadn't even known existed. "And let's be honest," she continued, her voice dripping with venom, "that dress was never going to look good on you anyway. You don't have the figure for it, you refuse to dye your hair like I asked, and your constant negativity shows all over your face. James' cousins are models, Mackenzie. Models. The photos would have been ruined with you in them anyway." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I refused to break down completely in front of everyone. The seamstress, looking mortified, helped me carefully remove the dress to avoid spreading the blood stain. As I changed back into my work clothes with shaking hands, I heard Stephanie on the phone, presumably with our mother, spinning a version of events that painted me as the villain. By the time I emerged, she was ending the call with, "I know, Mom. I've been trying so hard to include her, but she just doesn't want me to be happy." My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother is very upset. Call us when you've calmed down. You need to apologize to your sister." Without another word to Stephanie or the bridesmaids, I walked out of the salon, blood still trickling from multiple pinpricks, my dignity in tatters, and the last thread of hope for a real relationship with my sister finally, irrevocably severed. The drive home from Kleinfeld was a blur of tears and traffic. My hands shook so badly on the steering wheel that I had to pull over twice to compose myself. The physical pain from the pinpricks was nothing compared to the emotional wounds that had been ripped open, wounds that had been festering my entire life. When I finally arrived at my apartment, I collapsed on the sofa, too emotionally drained to even make it to my bedroom. My phone had been buzzing continuously with texts and calls from my parents, all taking Stephanie's side without even hearing my version of events. "You know your sister has been under tremendous stress. This wedding means everything to her. We raised you to be more understanding than this." Not one message asked if I was okay. Not one voicemail expressed concern that I had been bleeding and publicly humiliated. Their daughter, their other daughter, simply didn't matter in the equation. I turned my phone off and curled into a ball, allowing myself to properly cry for what felt like the first time in years. All the pent-up hurt, disappointment, and anger poured out in heaving sobs that left me gasping for breath. The doorbell rang around 9 p.m. I ignored it at first, but the persistent ringing suggested whoever it was wouldn't be leaving. Dragging myself to the door, I found Allison standing there with a bottle of wine in one hand and a bag from my favorite Thai restaurant in the other. "Your mom called me," she explained as I let her in. "She was worried when you stopped answering your phone. I told her I'd check on you." Allison's expression made it clear that checking on me was her priority, not reporting back to my mother. "Did she tell you what happened?" I asked, collapsing back onto the sofa. She gave me Stephanie's version. "Something about you intentionally ruining a dress and making a scene." Allison rolled her eyes as she uncorked the wine. I figured there was more to the story. I recounted the entire humiliating experience, showing her the small puncture wounds on my shoulder that had caused such outrage. As I spoke, Allison's expression morphed from concern to outright anger. "This is abuse, Mackenzie. Plain and simple. Your family has been emotionally abusing you for years, and now it's escalated to the point where you're literally bleeding while they continue to blame you." She poured generous glasses of wine for both of us. "Please tell me you're done with this wedding." "With all of them." "I think I have to be," I admitted, the words both painful and liberating. "Stephanie made it clear she doesn't want me there anyway." "Good. That's the healthiest thing I've heard you say about your family in the decade I've known you." We spent the evening talking through years of toxic family dynamics, patterns I had normalized, but which appeared shockingly dysfunctional when laid bare. The wine loosened emotions I had kept carefully contained, and by midnight a new feeling had begun to emerge through the hurt, anger. Pure, justified anger. The next morning, I awakened to a text from my mother, "Your father, and I think it's best if you don't attend the wedding. Stephanie is very upset and doesn't need any additional stress on her special day. We can discuss reconnecting after the honeymoon." Not even a question. Not even the pretense of hearing my side. Just excommunication from a major family event, as if I were a misbehaving child rather than a 32-year-old woman who had been bled, humiliated, and discarded. I sent a simple reply, "I understand." And I did understand, finally. I understood that nothing would ever change. I understood that I would always be less important, less valuable, less worthy of consideration than Stephanie. I understood that I had spent my entire life contorting myself to fit into a family that had no room for me as I actually was. For the next week, I went through the motions of my life in a daze. I worked, I ate, I slept, but emotionally I was numb. Allison checked on me daily, concerned about my uncharacteristic quietness. I assured her I was fine, just processing, but the truth was more complicated. In the recesses of my mind, thoughts were forming. Dangerous thoughts. Thoughts of justice, or perhaps revenge. Thoughts I would never have entertained before being publicly exiled from my own family. On the 8th day after the dress-fitting incident, curiosity got the better of me. I hadn't looked at Stephanie's social media since the blow-up, but that evening, I found myself scrolling through her Instagram. The wedding preparations continued as if nothing had happened. There were photos of finalized floral arrangements, close-ups of the embroidered cocktail napkins, selfies with Brittany and the other bridesmaids at what appeared to be a replacement dress fitting. The caption on that one read, "So grateful for loyal friends who support rather than sabotage. Hashtag best bridal party, hashtag drama-free zone." My hands trembled with renewed anger. Not only had I been cast out, but I was now being painted as the villain in Stephanie's public narrative. Scrolling further, I discovered something interesting. In her excitement about the wedding website, Stephanie had tagged the custom URL in several posts. On impulse, I visited the site, which featured a countdown to the big day, professionally shot engagement photos, and detailed information about the ceremony and reception. At the bottom of the site was a portal for the happy couple to manage RSVPs, vendor contacts, and other wedding logistics. Out of curiosity, I clicked it, expecting to be blocked by a password. Instead, I was automatically logged in. I remembered then, months ago, when the website was first created, Stephanie had been having trouble with some settings and had logged in on my laptop during a rare cordial lunch. "The site remembers your login information across devices, if you check that box," she had explained while fiddling with the settings. Apparently, she had never logged out on my profile. For several minutes, I just stared at the screen, my mind racing with possibilities. Before me lay access to every aspect of Stephanie's meticulously planned wedding. The guest list with email contacts for all 300 attendees. The vendor portal with the ability to modify orders, delivery times, and payment details. The venue information with options to adjust setup times and floor plans. With a few clicks, I could create chaos. The realization should have horrified me. The old Mackenzie, the people-pleasing, family-placating Mackenzie, would have immediately closed the browser and forgotten what she saw. But that Mackenzie had been left bleeding in a bridal salon, discarded by her family, and erased from her sister's wedding. This Mackenzie sat very still, considering her options. I opened a new tab and searched Stephanie Wilson James Parker wedding. Several local event blogs had picked up the story of the upcoming nuptials between James, a successful tech entrepreneur from a well-connected family, and Stephanie, described as a prominent event planner, a generous characterization of her sporadic employment history. The wedding was being positioned as one of the social events of the season. Another search revealed that James appeared completely unaware of what had truly happened between Stephanie and me. His social media showed him happily preparing for the wedding, including a post about being sad that his future sister-in-law couldn't attend due to an emergency. An emergency? Is that what Stephanie had told him? I returned to the wedding website admin panel and methodically explored what changes could be made, what notifications could be sent, what chaos could be created with just a few simple adjustments. The voice of reason in my head, which sounded suspiciously like Allison, urged caution. This could have real consequences. This would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But another voice, one that had been silenced for too long, whispered, they crossed the line first. Many, many times. I closed my laptop without making any changes, but the seed had been planted. For the first time in my life, I had the power to make Stephanie experience the public humiliation, the helplessness, the pain that she had so carelessly inflicted on me throughout our lives. All it would take was one click. The day before Stephanie's wedding dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect early summer days in New York that seemed designed specifically for picture-perfect celebrations. I had spent the past week in an ethical wrestling match with myself, alternating between righteous anger and creeping doubt. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open to the wedding website's admin panel. The site showed 297 confirmed guests, 12 vendors, and a minute-by-minute timeline for what Stephanie had been calling the most important day in Wilson family history. My finger hovered over the keyboard. Was I really considering this? Was I actually capable of deliberately sabotaging my own sister's wedding? I thought of all the times I had taken the high road over the years. All the times I had swallowed my hurt, made excuses for inexcusable behavior, and continued to extend olive branches that were repeatedly snapped in half and thrown back in my face. I thought of standing alone outside that Vegas nightclub while my sister partied inside. I thought of the bridal shower I had poured my heart into, only to be mocked in a bathroom. I thought of bleeding at the dress fitting while being accused of deliberate sabotage. I thought of my parents, who had never once in my life taken my side against their golden child. Something hardened inside me. A lifetime of being the bigger person had earned me nothing but more pain. Maybe, just this once, I would choose another path. With newfound determination, I began exploring exactly what changes could be made through the admin panel. I discovered I could send official-looking emails to all guests that would appear to come from the wedding planner's address. I could modify vendor instructions without triggering verification prompts. I could even change the displayed ceremony time and location details. The plan formed with surprising clarity. I wouldn't cancel anything outright. That would be too easily corrected with a few phone calls. Instead, I would create just enough confusion and logistical chaos to ensure the day was ruined while maintaining plausible deniability. First, I composed an email to all guests. The message was carefully worded to sound legitimate. Important update from Victoria Barnes Weddings regarding the Parker Wilson ceremony. Due to unforeseen circumstances with our original venue, the ceremony time has been adjusted to 5:30 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. and will now take place at the Foundry in Long Island City. We apologize for any inconvenience this last-minute change may cause. The reception will proceed as planned at the original location starting at 7 p.m. Please plan your transportation accordingly. For questions, please do not contact the bride or groom on their special day. Reach our emergency planning team at email protected. The email address I provided was a dummy account I had created that morning. The Foundry was a real venue, but one that would certainly not be hosting Stephanie's wedding. Any guests who arrived there would find themselves at an empty venue, miles away from the actual ceremony. I took a deep breath and clicked Send to all guests. The second phase of my plan involved the vendor portal. For each vendor, the florist, the caterer, the DJ, the lighting team, the photographer, I modified their delivery and arrival instructions, pushing everything back by 3 hours. I changed small but critical details in their setup notes. For the caterer, I adjusted the head count from 300 to 150. For the florist, I changed the delivery address to a similar-sounding street 10 blocks away. Each change was subtle enough that it might be attributed to miscommunication rather than deliberate sabotage. But collectively, they would ensure that Stephanie's perfect day would be anything but. The final, decisive click came when I confirmed all these changes at once through the Master Update button. A simple prompt appeared: apply all changes and notify vendors. My finger hesitated for just a moment before pressing yes. It was done. In less than 30 minutes, I had ensured that Stephanie's $100,000 wedding would dissolve into chaos. Guests would arrive at the wrong location or wrong time. Vendors would be hopelessly delayed or deliver incomplete orders. And the bride, who had built her entire identity around this perfect day, would watch helplessly as her carefully constructed fantasy crumbled around her. To cover my tracks, I cleared my browser history, deleted the dummy email account, and shut down my computer. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I turned my phone back on. Immediately, notifications flooded in. Missed calls from my parents, texts from distant relatives expressing confusion about my absence from the wedding, and most interestingly, several messages from confused guests asking about the venue change. It had already begun. I silenced my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by my window overlooking the city. For the first time since the dress-fitting incident, I felt something other than hurt or numbness. It wasn't exactly satisfaction, but perhaps something closer to justice. Tomorrow, Stephanie would experience what I had felt my entire life: the pain of carefully laid plans falling apart, of public humiliation, of helplessness. For once, she would not be the center of a perfect, adoring universe. For once, things would not go her way. As evening fell, I watched the activity on social media with detached interest. Victoria Barnes, the wedding planner, had posted a cryptic status about urgent client situation requiring all hands on deck. Brittany had shared a series of increasingly frantic Instagram stories featuring Stephanie in tears on the phone. One of the bridesmaids had tweeted about wedding venue confusion and asked if anyone knew what was happening. It was working exactly as I had planned. The chaos was unfolding, and I was safely removed from it, watching from afar like a spectator at a particularly satisfying drama. Tomorrow would bring the full impact of my actions. Tomorrow, Stephanie would finally understand what it felt like to be me. And yet, as I finished my wine and prepared for bed, an unexpected emotion crept in alongside the vindication, a whisper of regret, not for my actions, but for the family relationships that had deteriorated to the point where this felt like my only recourse. I pushed the thought aside. It was too late for second thoughts now. The click had been made. The wheels were in motion. Tomorrow would bring consequences, for Stephanie, certainly, but perhaps for me as well. Whatever happened, there would be no going back to the way things were before. And perhaps that was exactly what I needed. The morning of Stephanie's wedding, I woke early, my mind immediately racing with thoughts of what would be unfolding across town. For a brief moment, I considered reaching out, warning someone about what I had done, but I quickly suppressed the impulse. I had made my decision. Now I would see it through. Instead of obsessively checking social media, I deliberately disconnected. I went for a long run in Central Park, had brunch at a cafe where I wasn't likely to encounter anyone connected to the wedding, and then treated myself to a massage, a small luxury I rarely indulged in. If this was to be my day of reckoning, I would at least face it relaxed and clear-headed. It wasn't until evening that I allowed myself to check my phone. What I found exceeded even my expectations. My social media feeds were flooded with confused posts from wedding guests, passive-aggressive comments from relatives, and a particularly telling absence of any official wedding photos or celebratory posts from Stephanie. I pieced together what had happened through text messages from a distant cousin who had attended the wedding and had no idea about my banishment or my role in the chaos. According to my cousin Melissa, guests had begun arriving at the Foundry around 5 p.m. as instructed in my fake email. Finding the venue empty and locked, confusion quickly spread. Some guests called Stephanie directly, interrupting her pre-ceremony preparations with news that the venue was wrong. Others went to the original location, arriving hours before the actual ceremony was set to start. By the time Victoria Barnes realized what had happened and began making frantic calls to redirect guests, the damage was done. Only about half the invited guests eventually made it to the correct venue, many arriving during what should have been the reception. The vendor chaos was even more spectacular. The florist had attempted delivery to the wrong address and, unable to complete the delivery in time, had left only a fraction of the ordered arrangements at the actual venue. The caterer, working off the adjusted head count, had prepared food for only half the expected guests. The DJ arrived 3 hours late due to the modified schedule, leaving the reception without music for the first hour. The most devastating blow came from the photographer, who had been instructed to arrive for sunset portraits, at a time when the sun had already set. The result was a rushed, incomplete set of wedding photos, missing many of the carefully planned shots Stephanie had specified. Melissa's texts painted a picture of a bride in complete meltdown. Stephanie had apparently spent more time crying in the bridal suite than actually participating in her own wedding. When she did emerge for the ceremony, she was visibly distraught, her makeup ruined and her demeanor nothing like the radiant bride she had envisioned being. The reception had been equally disastrous. With limited food, delayed music, and confused guests trickling in at different times, the carefully orchestrated evening dissolved into awkward chaos. James' family, accustomed to flawlessly executed social events, were visibly dismayed. Stephanie's attempts to blame Victoria Barnes had backfired when the wedding planner produced evidence that someone had accessed the website and made unauthorized changes. My parents had apparently spent the entire reception alternating between comforting Stephanie and making embarrassed apologies to guests. The financial toll was significant. They had paid for a perfect wedding and received a disaster, with no hope of refunds from vendors who had simply followed the instructions they'd been given. As I scrolled through messages and posts, a notification appeared that made my heart stop, a direct message from James. Stephanie's fiancé, or husband now, I supposed, had never contacted me directly before. Mackenzie, I don't know if you're aware of what happened today, but it was a complete disaster. Stephanie is devastated. I know you two have your differences, but I'm trying to understand why you weren't there for your sister on what should have been the happiest day of her life. His message wasn't accusatory. He genuinely seemed to believe I had no knowledge of the chaos or my role in creating it. It appeared Stephanie had told him some version of events that painted me as voluntarily absent rather than explicitly uninvited. I closed the message without responding. What could I possibly say to him? Sorry your wedding was ruined, but your wife deserved it? Congratulations on marrying someone who has tormented me my entire life? The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I returned to work, went through the motions of normal life, but carried with me the knowledge of what I had done. No direct accusations came my way. It seemed the prevailing theory was that a technical glitch or Victoria's incompetence was to blame for the disaster. Then, exactly 1 week after the wedding, my phone rang with Stephanie's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I know it was you. Stephanie's voice was cold, controlled in a way I had rarely heard before. What are you talking about? I maintained an innocent tone, though my pulse quickened. The website changes. The emails. All of it. It was you. She wasn't asking, she was stating what she believed to be fact. Stephanie, I wasn't even involved in your wedding planning after you kicked me out at the dress fitting. Why would I have access to anything? Because you're sneaky and jealous and you've always wanted to see me fail. Her voice rose sharply. My wedding was ruined, Mackenzie. Do you understand that? The most important day of my life, completely destroyed. That sounds terrible, I said calmly. But I had nothing to do with it. Maybe this is karma for how you've treated people. Karma? She spat the word. You don't believe in karma. You're just using that as a cover for what you did. I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to make sure our entire family, all our friends, everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Go ahead, I replied, surprising myself with how little her threats affected me now. While you're at it, make sure you tell them exactly what happened at the dress fitting. Tell them how you left me bleeding and then kicked me out of your wedding. Tell them how you've treated me our entire lives. Tell them everything, Stephanie, not just the parts that make you look good. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had a new edge. James hired a cybersecurity specialist to look into the website changes. We're going to have proof it was you, and when we do, I'm taking legal action. The threat should have terrified me, but instead, I felt strangely calm. Good luck with that. I hope you and James are very happy together. He seems like a nice person who deserves better than what he got. I ended the call before she could respond, then blocked her number. I did the same with my parents' numbers and those of the bridesmaids. For the first time in my life, I was choosing to completely sever ties with the people who had caused me so much pain. The threatened legal action never materialized, likely because any investigation would have revealed the emotional abuse that preceded my actions, and because Stephanie had little actual evidence beyond her suspicions. Instead, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she and James had canceled their honeymoon to the Maldives, the tension from the wedding disaster having spilled over into their first days as a married couple. The final piece of information came 2 months after the wedding, when Allison ran into a friend who worked at James' company. Did you hear about James and Stephanie? She asked me over coffee. Apparently they're separated. James moved out 3 weeks ago. I stared at her in shock. Already? They've barely been married 2 months. Allison nodded. According to Ryan, the wedding disaster was just the beginning. Once James saw how Stephanie behaved under pressure, blaming everyone else, treating service staff horribly, throwing tantrums, he started noticing other red flags. The final straw was when he found out she'd lied about you not being invited to the wedding. She told him you'd refused to attend because you were jealous of her happiness. A week later, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox with the subject line, "Thank you." It was from James. Mackenzie, I know we never really got to know each other, and after recent events, we probably never will. But I wanted to thank you for the wake-up call, even if it came in an unconventional form. Stephanie and I are not continuing our marriage. The wedding day revealed aspects of her character that I should have seen long before. I wish you well and hope you find healing from what I now understand was a difficult family situation. James. I read the email 3 times, unsure how to feel. Had he figured out my involvement? Was this his way of acknowledging it without directly accusing me? Or had he simply recognized the toxic patterns in Stephanie that I had endured for years? Either way, his message brought an unexpected sense of closure. My action, morally questionable as it was, had inadvertently saved him from years in a marriage with someone who would never prioritize his feelings or needs above her own desires. As for my relationship with my family, the silence continued. My parents made a few attempts to reach out through intermediaries, but I maintained my distance. Stephanie, from what I could gather through social media, had spun an elaborate narrative that cast her as the victim of circumstances and incompetent vendors. She never publicly acknowledged my absence from the wedding or the dissolution of her marriage. The wedding disaster hadn't fixed my family or healed my emotional wounds. But it had given me something perhaps more valuable, the courage to finally walk away from relationships that had been hurting me for as long as I could remember. In destroying Stephanie's perfect day with a single click, I had freed myself from a lifetime of being second best. The cost had been high, morally, emotionally, and in terms of family ties. But sitting in my apartment, peaceful and alone, I couldn't bring myself to truly regret it. Sometimes justice comes not from the universe or from others, but from our own hands. Sometimes healing begins not with forgiveness, but with finally allowing yourself to acknowledge the depth of the hurt you've experienced. And sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. I had lost a sister, but in the process, I had found myself. The trade, painful as it was, seemed worth it. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between taking the high road and standing up for yourself? Do you think what I did was justified, or did I go too far? Let me know in the comments below. If you found my story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize your own well-being sometimes. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, family should be a source of love and support, not pain and rejection. You deserve better, and sometimes you have to be the one to create that better reality for yourself.